Virgin bride abandons groom at altar to save crash victim. Discovers it's her long-lost childhood boyfriend. The chapel bells rang like war drums over Atlanta's high summer haze. Inside the towering stained-glass sanctuary of New Kingdom Cathedral, rows of glittering guests sat stiffly, necks craned toward the altar. Photographers hovered like flies near honey. Pews were packed with socialites in designer hats, city officials, and half the congregation of the Sinclair megachurch empire. But behind the heavy mahogany doors, Naomi Sinclair couldn't breathe. She stood frozen in the gilded bridal suite, wrapped in a lace gown worth more than her college tuition, a veil trembling in her hands. Ivory orchids framed the window behind her. Somewhere down in the sanctuary, her father's voice echoed, booming proudly into the mic. "We gather here today in unity, prosperity, and power." Naomi's heart thundered beneath her corset. Her reflection in the ornate mirror looked like a stranger. Soft brown skin, glistening with nervous sweat, eyes too wide, lips pressed tight beneath pink gloss. A virgin bride, the symbol of virtue, obedience, and alliance, and a pawn. Her fingers clutched the edge of the vanity table as if it might anchor her to reality. This wedding wasn't about love. It was about image, power, a carefully arranged merger between Atlanta's most influential pastor, her father, Jonah Sinclair, and one of the city's youngest, wealthiest property developers, Deshawn Graves. She barely knew Deshawn. Handsome, yes, sophisticated, charismatic when the cameras were rolling. But behind closed doors, his touch was cold, his eyes calculating. He made her feel like fine art hanging in the corner of his luxury penthouse, admired but untouched. "You said yes," she reminded herself. "You said yes to save your father's name, yes to secure your mother's legacy, and yet her body wouldn't move." The bridesmaids knocked once before entering. Jasmine Bell, maid of honor and self-proclaimed best friend, stepped in first, her sleek ponytail slicing the air like a whip. "Girl, stop stalling," she said, brushing invisible lint from Naomi's veil. "He's waiting, and so is half of Georgia's elite." Naomi managed a nod, though nausea curled behind her ribs. Just as Jasmine opened the door to escort her down, a sharp gasp cut through the air, from outside the cathedral, then a scream, metal crunching. The entire suite froze. Another bridesmaid stepped to the window. "Oh my God, Naomi! Someone just got hit. A car crash, right outside." The word crash echoed like thunder through her skull. Naomi rushed to the balcony window. Below, chaos unfolded. A dark sedan flipped halfway over the curb, smoke curling from beneath its hood. Glass glinted like diamonds across the pavement. A crowd was forming, and lying in the street, half-conscious, bloodied but breathing, was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, brown skin smeared with soot and red. He turned his face slightly. Naomi's breath vanished. Number? It couldn't be. That wasn't real. He couldn't be. But memory surged like a tidal wave. Childhood afternoons in the foster care center, a boy with gap-toothed smiles and scraped knees, calling her Butterbean before vanishing in a fire. They said no one survived. He was older now, but those eyes. Naomi dropped the bouquet. "No! Someone help him!" she shouted, tearing off her veil as she bolted down the hallway. "Naomi!" Jasmine screeched. "Are you insane? You're about to get married." She didn't answer. She ran barefoot down the marble corridor, past stunned ushers, down the cathedral steps. Her gown snagged on rose petals. She reached the man first. Kneeling in the street, she cupped his blood-streaked face, ignoring the whispers of stunned onlookers. His eyelids fluttered. "Butterbean," he rasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Milo," the world around her spun. Malik Milo Jefferson, her childhood best friend, the boy she cried for after the fire, the boy they buried an empty coffin for, alive, in her arms, on her wedding day. As sirens wailed in the distance and cameras began to click, Naomi's future fractured. She looked up at the towering church she'd just fled. The guests were rising, the pastor was calling her name, and inside the sanctuary, Deshaun Graves stood at the altar, alone, fuming, humiliated. But Naomi didn't look back. She pressed Malik's hand against her chest and whispered, "Don't you die on me, not again." The waiting room at King Memorial Hospital was painted in soft greens and muted blues, but Naomi's world buzzed in static grey. She sat hunched on the plastic bench, wedding gown bunched awkwardly around her knees, the silk soaked at the hem with blood and asphalt. Her fingers were streaked with Malik's blood, still tacky beneath her chipped French manicure. She hadn't even changed. Jasmine had screamed at her not to leave. Pastor Jonah's voice had thundered down the steps behind her. Even the bishop himself had tried to block the door. But Naomi pushed through them all, because he had called her Butterbean. Only one person in the world ever called her that. The boy with the messy cornrows and crooked smile who used to sneak her jelly sandwiches at recess. The boy they all said died in a fire the summer she turned 13. Now he was in surgery, fighting for life again, and she wasn't letting go this time. The automatic doors hissed open. A nurse stepped through, followed by a woman in her mid-20s, caramel skin, bantu knots tight to her scalp, and a gold septum ring glinting under the fluorescence. She moved fast, eyes sharp, heels louder than authority. "Are you Naomi Sinclair?" she demanded, her voice clipped and furious. Naomi rose slowly. "Yes. Who are you?" The woman stopped, chest heaving, then softened, just slightly. "I'm Nyla Jefferson, Malik's sister. Well, technically adopted, but it's real enough. I work here." She flashed her badge, Assistant Nursing Supervisor. Naomi blinked. He goes by Malik now?" Nyla crossed her arms. "He's been Malik for 12 years. Most people call him Milo." Naomi almost crumbled again at the sound of it. Milo. "Is he okay?" "He's alive," Nyla said, stepping closer. "The injuries are bad, concussion, broken ribs, dislocated shoulder, but he's strong, he always is." Naomi nodded slowly. The words were floating, but not landing. Nyla's eyes raked Naomi's dress with judgment. "So, let me guess. You saw him in the street on your way to your 6-figure marriage and thought, 'Wait, isn't that the kid we left behind in that burning house?'" Naomi flinched. "I didn't leave him behind." Her voice cracked. "They told me he died. I cried for years. I lit candles." "Well, congratulations." Nyla's tone was dry. "The resurrection happened. He's been building himself up all over again, quietly, away from all of this." She gestured to the lace and the chaos. "Drama." Naomi was about to reply when another voice cut through the hallway. A low, raspy drawl full of rhythm and steel. "Well, damn, you really found him again, huh?" Naomi turned to see a woman striding toward her in oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed straw hat, which she yanked off to reveal a glorious crown of silver-streaked curls. Loretta Lowe Campbell, her mother's younger sister, Naomi's fiercest confidant, jazz singer turned boutique owner, the woman who told Naomi what real heartbreak looked like. "Lowe," Naomi whispered. Aunt Lowe raised a brow. "Don't act surprised, baby. I got the hospital alert on my phone before you finished fainting." She stepped closer, gently touched Naomi's bloodied hands, and then whispered something too low for Nyla to hear. "Is it true? Is it really Malik?" Naomi nodded, eyes wet. Aunt Lowe exhaled sharply. "Lord have mercy. I never believed he was gone. I felt him out there. But your daddy—" She trailed off, biting her lip. Never mind that. You did the right thing walking out of that chapel. I didn't walk, Naomi said, voice barely a whisper. I ran. A few hours passed. Malik was out of surgery, sedated and stable. Naomi refused to leave his side, no matter how many calls she ignored from Jasmine, her father, or Deshaun Graves himself. She sat in the dim hospital room while monitors beeped steadily, watching Malik's chest rise and fall. His face was bruised, stitched above the eyebrow, but it was him, her Milo, the boy who once told her she'd be famous for painting clouds, the boy who made her pinky swear they'd find a treehouse big enough for 2 grown-ups. He stirred. Naomi sat forward, his eyelids lifted, slowly. He blinked. She reached for his hand. Hey, it's me. He stared at her. Recognition flickered, then landed. Butterbean, he whispered. Naomi let out a shaky laugh. Still calling me that, huh? His lips curled weakly. Always. A long pause. Then, they told me you forgot me. She swallowed hard. Never. I prayed for you every night. The door swung open. Pastor Jonah Sinclair entered, thunder in a tailored suit. His presence filled the room like smoke. Naomi, he said, eyes burning past her to the hospital bed. We need to talk. Now. Naomi stood protectively. No, Daddy, I'm not leaving him. Not again. Pastor Jonah's jaw clenched. You made a fool of our name today. You walked out on a union blessed by God. On a man who can give you the world. I don't want the world, she whispered. I want the truth. Jonah turned his eyes to Malik. That boy is nothing but a ghost. A boy whose existence was buried with the ashes of a fire no one was meant to survive. Naomi blinked. You knew? He said nothing. The silence was confirmation. The skyline glittered like shattered glass as twilight fell over downtown Atlanta. Inside the penthouse of Deshaun Graves, silence reigned. A deep, calculating silence, like the moment before a lion pounces. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, dressed still in his tailored ivory tuxedo, boutonniere wilted, champagne untouched. The altar he'd waited at for over an hour might as well have been in another world. Behind him, his phone buzzed non-stop. Reporters, bloggers, guests, stockholders. And Naomi, gone, with some half-dead man pulled from the street, a man who, according to whispered headlines now, she recognized. Deshaun's knuckles turned white around his whiskey glass. The woman he planned to make his wife, and leverage in his political climb, had just humiliated him in front of the entire city. And he didn't lose. He never lost. A soft knock came at the door. Enter, Deshaun said flatly. The door opened. Jasmine Bell stepped inside, still in her blush bridesmaid gown, stilettos dangling from her fingers, hair slightly undone. Her face glowed with just enough fake concern. Thought you might want company, she said, stepping into the room. Deshaun didn't turn. Came to gloat? She laughed. Number. Well, not entirely. She poured herself a drink from the cart, then sank onto the velvet sofa like she owned it. You know she ran to the hospital with him, right? Jasmine said, crossing her legs slowly. Didn't even look back. I was right there. 1 second we're fixing her veil. Next, she's barefoot in the street like some damn hood fairy tale. Deshaun's jaw twitched. Who is he? Jasmine sipped. Name's Malik Jefferson, but he goes by Milo. I did a little digging. He works at King Memorial. Nurse. Good one, apparently. Quiet life, low profile, no social media, no scandals. She waited, then delivered the blow. Used to go by Malik Washington. Ring any bells? Deshaun turned sharply. Washington? She nodded. Yep. That little orphan boy who went missing in that house fire back in 13. The same year your father bought that whole neighborhood for development. Right after the incident. Deshaun's face darkened. Jasmine leaned closer. So you tell me, Deshawn, why does Naomi's dead childhood best friend show up at her wedding? Broken, bleeding, alive? Across town, Naomi sat in the back of Aunt Lo's car, wrapped in a blanket over her ruined dress, head resting against the window. The city passed by in blurry streaks. I need answers, she whispered. My father, he knew Milo was alive. Why wouldn't he tell me? Aunt Lo kept one hand on the wheel, the other gripping a to-go cup of ginger tea. Because, baby, sometimes truth don't serve power. And your daddy, he's been feeding the latter so long, he forgot how to digest the first. Naomi frowned. He treated Milo like a ghost, like he didn't deserve to exist. 'Cause Milo reminds him of fire, Lo murmured, of things he couldn't control. That boy used to shine like a light and Jonah hated it. You two were inseparable. The church members noticed, the donors noticed, and when Milo's mama went missing, Jonah said it was time to separate y'all. Naomi sat up slowly. What do you mean, his mama went missing? But before Lo could answer, Naomi's phone buzzed. Incoming call. Deshawn Graves. She stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then answered. Naomi. His voice was calm. Too calm. I want to talk. Face to face. Not now, she said. You owe me that much. A conversation. A little dignity. She was quiet. Fine, Naomi said. Tomorrow. My terms. Your father will be there. No, she said sharply. Just you and me. Deshawn hesitated, then agreed. Midnight. Your mother's garden. No press. No theatrics. The line cut. Aunt Lo arched a brow. Meeting the devil at midnight? You sure you're ready for that, baby? Naomi didn't answer, but her eyes were flint. The next night. Magnolia Garden. The garden behind her late mother's house still smelled of honeysuckle and moonflower. It was where Naomi learned to pray with her hands in the dirt, where Malik once carved a heart into the willow tree for her birthday. Deshawn arrived in black, no tie, face unreadable. I came alone, he said. Naomi stood across from him. Good. He stepped closer. I loved you, Naomi. I still do. No, she said. You loved owning the idea of me. His expression shifted. You walked out on me. You humiliated me. And I'd do it again, she whispered, because the man in that hospital bed, he's worth more than all your wealth. Deshawn's face twitched, the first crack in the mask. Naomi studied him. You knew who he was, before the wedding, before I even saw him, didn't you? Deshawn didn't deny it. He was supposed to stay dead, he said softly. That was the arrangement. Naomi's stomach turned. Arrangement? He wasn't the only one in that house when it burned, Naomi. And not all fires are accidents. Her knees buckled slightly. What did you do? Deshawn stepped closer. You think he came back to you by accident? You were a fairy tale. He was a ghost. Let the past stay buried. Naomi backed away. You didn't just lie. You helped bury him. He didn't respond, but the look in his eyes confirmed everything. As Deshawn walked off into the shadows, Naomi clutched the willow tree to stay upright. Her childhood love had returned, but the fire that took him wasn't fate. It was planned. The hospital was quieter at night. Dim lights cast golden halos on polished floors, while machines hummed steadily like lullabies. Naomi stood in the hallway outside Malik's room, arms folded tightly over her chest, engagement ring burning in her palm like a live coal. She hadn't slept, couldn't, not after what Deshawn said, not after realizing the boy she once loved, the one she thought had died, had been buried by more than just smoke. He had been erased. Inside the room, Malik Jefferson stirred beneath the thin blue blanket. His stitches pulled slightly when he turned his head, but his breath was steadier. His skin, still marred by bruises, was regaining color. When Naomi stepped in, he smiled faintly. You look like a ghost. he rasped. She sat at his bedside. You always said I'd haunt you if you forgot me. He chuckled, then winced. Ouch! Don't make me laugh. Ribs. They sat in silence for a moment, just breathing in the presence of each other. Malik reached for her hand. Tell me it wasn't a dream. Tell me you really ran from your wedding, for me. Naomi hesitated, then opened her fist. The diamond ring glittered coldly in her palm. I told him it's over, she said softly. He didn't take it well. Malik's face darkened. Deshaun Graves doesn't do well, especially not with rejection. She nodded. I know. And there's more. Naomi recounted what Deshaun had said in the garden, his cryptic mention of arrangements, the implication that the fire that destroyed Malik's life was no accident. When she finished, Malik's jaw was clenched so tight she thought it might crack. His daddy owned the block, he muttered. Started buying up the houses a year before the fire. My mama used to call it the slow clearing. They'd offer just enough money to tempt the desperate, then hike utilities and send threats. Naomi's eyes widened. And your mom didn't sell? Malik shook his head. She said, I won't trade my baby's future for blood money. He swallowed. 2 months later, she disappeared. I came home from school, and she was gone. Naomi reached for his hand again. They tried to erase you both. But I'm still here. His grip tightened, and now I know what I need to do. Later that day, Naomi stood on the steps of Sinclair Hall, her family's community center, flanked by Aunt Lo and a few longtime parishioners. Cameras were already positioned, waiting for her statement. She stepped forward in a clean black dress, her curls untamed, her eyes calm, but razor-sharp. To those asking, yes, I left my wedding. Yes, I returned the ring. No, I won't apologize. She raised the ring and held it up for all to see. Because love, to me, has never been a transaction, and I will not be bartered, branded, or silenced. Behind her, Aunt Lo beamed proudly. Across town, Deshaun watched the live feed in his office, swirling a glass of bourbon. Next to him, Jasmine, now back in her signature red lipstick, draped herself across the edge of the couch. Cute speech, she said, unimpressed. She thinks truth protects her. Sweet Deshaun didn't respond. His mind was elsewhere, plotting, measuring weaknesses. Finally, he spoke. We'll let her have the stage, for now. Meanwhile, in a modest corner of King Memorial's records office, Nyla sat surrounded by manila folders and scanned documents. Her fingers flipped through old city zoning files, patient records, and forgotten case reports. And then she found it. A fire report dated July 9th, 2013. Red-stamped, closed. Except, the signature line was empty. No fire marshal, no closure details, no evidence log, and the last name on the address record, D. Graves, Sr. That evening, Naomi and Aunt Lo returned home, only to find the front porch bathed in headlights. A car was waiting. A tall man stepped out, dark navy suit, smooth skin, silver-rimmed glasses, the kind of man who looked like he signed million-dollar deals before breakfast. Naomi stepped forward cautiously. I'm sorry to intrude, the man said, extending a hand. My name is Thaddeus Rowe. I'm an attorney. She stared at him. And who do you represent? He gave a calm, practiced smile. Mr. Deshaun Graves. He's prepared to offer a settlement in exchange for your silence and for the continued anonymity of Mr. Malik Jefferson. Aunt Lo stepped forward like a bullet. You best get off this porch before your suit ends up with tire tracks on it. Thaddeus tilted his head. You misunderstand, ma'am. This is not a threat. It's protection. Things could unravel very quickly if the wrong questions are asked about that fire. Naomi didn't flinch. Let them unravel, she said. We'll be the ones pulling the thread. The old club on Auburn Avenue wasn't part of the scene anymore. Not for the new elite, anyway. But its velvet curtains and whiskey-soaked walls still whispered stories. It was called the Velvet Horn, a jazz haunt from Atlanta's golden days. And tonight, it had one star, Loretta Lowe Campbell. She stepped onto the small stage like it was a throne, wearing a floor-length red satin gown that hugged her curves and shimmered beneath the dim lights. Her silver curls were pulled into a sculpted roll, a single ivory flower tucked behind her ear. The crowd quieted. The band played low. Then she sang. They say the flame dies down with time, but I been burning since you left mine. Her voice was smoke and silk, haunted and honey-sweet. At the corner booth, Naomi sat watching, her eyes glassy with emotion. Malik sat beside her, one arm still bound in a sling, the other resting gently on her thigh. He hadn't heard that voice in 10 years. Lowe finished her set to roaring applause. When she stepped down and joined them at the booth, Naomi smiled. You still got it. Lowe grinned. Baby, I never lost it. I just saved it for when the world needed it most. Malik raised his glass of ginger ale. Thank you for not giving up on me. Lowe's smile faltered just slightly. I never could. You and Naomi were born under the same moon, both too stubborn for your own good, and too full of heart. Then her expression turned serious. I think it's time y'all knew everything. Lowe began to tell them about the summer before the fire, about how she had been in love, once, with a man named Calvin Washington, Malik's uncle, who raised him after his mother vanished. He wasn't just raising that boy, she said softly. He was protecting him. Calvin was part of a group trying to stop Graves Enterprises from bulldozing our neighborhood. They found out some dirty money had gone into the rezoning votes, but Calvin disappeared right before he could testify. Naomi leaned forward. You think the fire was a cover-up? Lowe nodded. I know it was. Calvin vanished that week, and 2 days later, the fire started in his basement. Malik sat in stunned silence. All this time, I thought I was left behind. I thought I was forgotten. Lowe shook her head slowly. No, baby. You were hidden. Someone got you out. I don't know who. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe God. Malik's eyes darkened with purpose. Then it's time I stopped hiding. Elsewhere that night. In a luxury condo high above Peachtree Street, Jasmine Bell lay sprawled on a chaise lounge, scrolling through photos on her phone. She paused on a blurry image of Naomi and Malik holding hands outside the hospital. She zoomed in. The tenderness on Naomi's face twisted something inside her, something bitter and sour. Deshawn stood by the window, taking a call. When he hung up, Jasmine rose and slipped her arms around his waist from behind. She's not coming back to you, she whispered. She doesn't have to, Deshawn said coolly. She just has to lose everything she runs to. Jasmine smirked. You really think he loves her, after all that time? That's fairy tale crap. Deshawn turned. If he does, all the better. It gives us something to destroy. Later that night, back at the Velvet Horn, the jazz band struck up a new tune, a slow, sultry number with a crawling trumpet and bass line like a heartbeat. Malik stood, extending his hand to Naomi. Dance with me. She hesitated. Your ribs? He smiled crookedly. They'll survive, if not worth it. She laughed, a real, full laugh, and stood, letting him lead her to the small dance floor. The lights were low, the club intimate. They moved slowly, Malik's hand resting just above the small of her back, her palm against his chest. Naomi looked up at him. You sure you're real? Malik leaned down, his forehead brushing hers. You tell me. Their lips met, slow, searching, reverent. A kiss not born of impulse, but years of aching silence, of missed time, of love deferred but not destroyed. It deepened, became hungrier. Naomi felt her knees go soft, her heart bloom wide open, and in that moment, neither of them noticed the camera flash. From the shadows, a figure slipped away, Jasmine, and her lens had just captured the perfect scandal. The photo hit the internet like a match to gasoline. Within hours, Yas runaway, bride returns, for ghost lover was trending across social platforms. Tabloids ran the headline with unrelenting cruelty. Naomi Sinclair, from virgin bride to street savior, the jazz club kiss that shook Atlanta. It didn't matter that Malik was unconscious just days ago. It didn't matter that Naomi had abandoned a loveless arrangement to follow her heart. What mattered was optics. The daughter of Atlanta's most influential pastor was now public property, and the wolves were hungry. Naomi stared at the screen in stunned silence. The image showed her and Malik on the dance floor at the Velvet Horn, lips locked, eyes closed. A single spotlight glowed down on them, making them look almost staged, like actors in a scandalous play. Aunt Lo stood behind her, arms folded tight across her chest. "They really came for your throat, baby," she muttered. "Didn't waste no time." Naomi's throat tightened. She dropped the phone on the coffee table like it had burned her. "Jasmine," she whispered. It had to be her. Aunt Lo didn't argue. That girl always wanted what you had. But what's worse, she knows how to play dirty without leaving fingerprints. Naomi rose, her hands shaking. "I have to go to the church. My father's going to be livid." Lo grabbed her wrist. "And what good would that do? That man ain't looking for the truth, Naomi. He's looking for control." Naomi yanked her arm back, voice rising. "He's still my father." A pause, then softly, "Yeah, and that's the problem." Meanwhile, in the modest back office of King Memorial, Malik sat with Nyla, poring over the fire report she had uncovered. No official cause, no surviving adult listed, a blank signature line where the fire marshal's name should have been. "This isn't just incomplete," Neela said. "It's deliberately scrubbed." Malik leaned back, eyes narrowing. "So whoever started it had someone on the inside." Neela flipped to the final page. "You see this?" She pointed to a faint stamp. "City Planning Dept. Marked this case resolved by default. That usually only happens if no one follows up, or if someone powerful closes it." Malik's mind reeled. "You think this was tied to the rezoning?" Nyla nodded. "It has to be. All those houses were cleared 6 months after the fire, sold to Graves Enterprises at 1/3 of market value. You were the last legal resident listed." Malik clenched his jaw, "which means I was a problem they thought they solved." He stood suddenly. "I need to go somewhere." Nyla stood too. "Where?" "To the ruins." Where it started. Across the city, Naomi sat stiff-backed in her father's office at New Kingdom Cathedral. The room was built to intimidate. Tall-backed leather chairs, golden-trimmed bookshelves, an oil painting of Pastor Jonah Sinclair hanging behind his desk like a holy relic. He didn't even look up when she entered. "You humiliated this family," he said coldly. Naomi stayed quiet. "You ran from a God-ordained union, Naomi. You defied my word. And now you parade around nightclubs, kissing some ghost from the gutter like a teenager with no training." She bit back the tears. "He's not a ghost, Daddy. He's a man who survived things we can't imagine. And I love him." Pastor Jonah looked up slowly. "Love? That's what you call this?" She nodded. "Yes, it's the first real thing I've felt in years." He rose, walked around the desk, then, in a low, biting tone, "You think this is about you and your little feelings? That man is a liability. He will destroy everything I've built." Naomi's eyes widened. What do you mean, everything you've built? Pastor Jonah straightened his tie. Graves Enterprises and New Kingdom are aligned in purpose. Shared investments, real estate, political endorsements. Your marriage was never just about you. It was a covenant, an agreement signed in trust and capital. Naomi's voice shook. So I was a pawn. He didn't answer. Her shoulders sagged. Then you never knew me. You never saw me. Just the symbol I was supposed to be. Pastor Jonah's expression didn't change, but a flicker of something, shame, passed behind his eyes. You walk away from this, Naomi, and you walk away from everything. She rose slowly. Then maybe it's time I build something of my own. Malik stood in front of the charred remnants of his childhood home. The city had fenced the lot, but the land was still vacant. No development ever rose in its place. The air smelled of dirt and ghost smoke. He walked to the back, toward where the basement stairs used to be. There, covered in weeds, was a rusted storm cellar door. He pried it open and descended. The space was small, cold, concrete walls still blackened with old soot, but in the far corner, something caught his eye. A rusted metal box. He opened it. Inside, a singed folder labeled Neighborhood Defense Alliance, a torn photo of a group protest, and a handwritten letter addressed to Calvin Washington. Malik unfolded the paper. His breath caught. It was a warning. They know you won't sell. They'll try to scare you first. If anything happens, protect the boy. Burn this letter. It was signed with a single name, L.C. Back at the apartment, Naomi returned to find Malik already waiting. He was seated on the floor in front of the coffee table, papers spread around him. When he looked up, she saw something shift in him. He wasn't just the boy from the past anymore. He was a man who had survived. She knelt beside him. I saw my father, she said softly. He doesn't want you around because you're the truth, and the truth threatens him. Malik nodded. Then we give them truth. He passed her the letter. Naomi read it in silence, her eyes filled with tears. L.C., she whispered. That's Lowe. Loretta Campbell. Malik's breath stilled. Your aunt? Naomi nodded. She tried to warn him. She tried to protect you. And now, we have proof. Their eyes met. No more running. No more fear. It was time to burn their way through the lies. Together. The document was thick, at least 20 pages, bound in gold-embossed leather and labeled in clean serif font. Pre-nuptial agreement between Deshaun Elijah Graves and Naomi Leanne Sinclair. It sat on Naomi's lap like a brick of guilt. She hadn't even remembered signing it. But now, with the blood of betrayal still fresh between her and her father, and Deshaun circling like a vulture in custom-tailored suits, Naomi knew one thing. This wasn't just a contract. It was a leash. She sat in Aunt Lowe's living room with Malik, Nyla, and Lowe herself, papers spread out across the table like the evidence board in a courtroom drama. A pot of tea steamed between them, untouched. Malik ran a hand through his curls. He had this drawn up weeks before the proposal? Naomi nodded, still dazed. Apparently, my father had me sign it after Sunday service one day. Said it was just standard church property protection. I didn't even read it. Lowe let out a low whistle. That's what happens when you train a girl to say, yes, sir, before she ever learns to say, why? Nyla snorted. Page 12. Read it. Naomi's eyes scanned the section. In the event of dissolution or breach of marital contract, the party of the first part, Naomi Leanne Sinclair, agrees to surrender any claim, public or private, to the assets or holdings tied to Graves Enterprises, or its sister companies, subsidiaries, or acquisitions dated prior to and through the term of marriage. Naomi blinked. Wait, this means... Nyla pointed. It means if you speak out about the rezoning scandal, the fire, anything connected to Graves Enterprises, you're in breach and legally muzzled." "Even if we were never married?" Malik asked. Lo shook her head. "The language is sneaky. It frames the engagement as part of the legal term, and I'll bet my last microphone he had this notarized." Naomi leaned back, her heart thundering. "They tried to lock me down, to keep me quiet. This whole thing, the wedding, the press, it was never about me." Malik slid his hand over hers. "But you got out, and now we flip the script." That afternoon, Lo brought Naomi into the back room of her boutique, not the one customers saw with its silk wraps and custom perfume bottles, but the one filled with dust-covered boxes, old cassettes, and broken records from a different life. "This used to be my heart," Lo said quietly, opening a carved wooden chest. "Before your mama died, before Calvin vanished." She pulled out a crumpled photo and handed it to Naomi. It showed a younger Lo, all high cheekbones and sharp attitude, holding hands with a tall man in a leather trench coat. His arm was slung around her shoulders, and a boy, maybe 4 or 5, sat on his lap. "Is that—" Lo nodded. "Calvin Washington, and that boy on his lap was Malik, back when his mama dropped him off for a short trip and never came back. Calvin took him in like his own blood." Naomi studied the photo. "You were in love with him." "I was ready to marry him," Lo said, voice tight. "But then Calvin started digging into Graves Sr., said the land deals were dirty, that something ugly was coming. He swore he had a whistleblower in City Hall. Then he disappeared. 2 weeks later, the fire." Naomi gripped the edge of the table. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before?" Lo exhaled slowly. "Because when you bury a man and no one comes to claim the body, you learn to stay quiet, and I figured your daddy had already clipped your wings. But baby," she touched Naomi's cheek, "you're flying now, so fly strong." By nightfall, Naomi had made her decision. She walked into the sleek modern building where Deshawn's office sat on the 17th floor. Unannounced, his secretary nearly spilled her sparkling water when Naomi pushed through. "Miss Sinclair, he's in a meeting." "Cancel it," Naomi said without looking back. Inside, Deshawn was standing beside a digital presentation screen, talking to 2 executives. When Naomi entered, he didn't blink. "Gentlemen, give us the room." As they filed out, Naomi stepped forward, calm as glass. "You really thought I'd stay silent," she said. Deshawn poured himself a drink. "I thought you'd be smarter. Your family's name is in enough dirt already. Why dig deeper?" Naomi pulled the prenup from her purse and laid it on the table between them. "You tried to make me an accessory, but I'm not your property, Deshawn, and this only works if I'm afraid." His eyes flicked to the document. "It's legal." "Maybe, but so was slavery." He chuckled dryly. "You're bluffing. Anything you say publicly, I counter with breach of agreement. You'll lose your family's assets, your standing, your credibility." Naomi leaned in. "You can threaten my past, but you can't erase my future. And I've got a secret you don't. I'm not alone anymore, and neither is Malik." Deshawn's jaw ticked, but his voice stayed smooth. "That boy's gonna end up dead again. This time, I won't bother with flowers." Naomi's heart stuttered, but her stare didn't waver. "Then I suggest you bring more than threats next time, Deshawn. Bring a lawyer." She turned and walked out. Across town, Malik stood at the gates of a gated estate tucked into the Buckhead Hills. The name etched in wrought iron above the entrance read, Graves Manor. He wasn't here to make threats. He was here to see a ghost. The butler who answered looked startled. "May I help you?" "I'm here to speak to Graves Sr., Malik said. "Tell him it's about his past." After a long wait, he was led into a cavernous parlor, all mahogany and colonial theft, and then he appeared, Douglas Graves Sr., the man who built the Graves empire with steel, cement, and silence. Tall, lean, with a shock of white hair and a cane he didn't seem to need. He studied Malik with cool detachment. "You have your mother's eyes." Malik's spine straightened. "You knew her?" "I knew of her," Graves said, "and I knew your uncle." Foolish man, thought loyalty and land meant something. Malik stepped forward. "Why burn the house?" Graves shrugged. "I didn't burn it. Fire doesn't ask permission. I just made sure no one asked questions." "And you thought I was gone?" Graves smiled, wolf-like. "We all have ghosts, son. Best to leave them buried." Malik's voice dropped. "I'm not a ghost. I'm the reckoning." The morning air in Atlanta was thick with tension, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Naomi Sinclair stood before her mirror, her reflection blurry through the steam curling up from her tea. She wasn't wearing designer gowns or the soft pastel dresses she once favored for Sunday service. Today she wore black slacks, a wine-colored blouse, natural curls wild around her face, a warrior's uniform. She picked up the old silver locket her mother had left behind, the one she used to wear only on anniversaries and silent days. Inside was a photo, her mother, smiling, and a handwritten line on the back. "Speak even if your voice shakes." She clipped the necklace around her throat. Then she grabbed her phone and dialed her next move. An hour later, inside the studio of Morning Atlanta Today, Jasmine Bell adjusted her curls and double-checked her contour in the mirror. She had been invited as a guest to discuss the ongoing runaway bride scandal, and she had every intention of making the camera love her. She wore blush pink again, sweet, innocent, still the perfect best friend. But as she stepped onto the set, her smile faltered. Sitting across from the anchor was Naomi, dressed in defiant color, chin high, eyes steady. The anchor smiled politely. "Miss Sinclair asked to join the segment at the last minute. We thought it'd make for a balanced discussion." Jasmine's stomach twisted. "Of course," she lied. "We're always stronger together." They took their seats. Lights flared. The red light blinked on. Live. Today on Morning Atlanta. Today we're joined by socialite and entrepreneur Jasmine Bell and the woman at the center of a growing media storm, Naomi Sinclair. Let's get right into it. The host turned to Naomi. "The city watched you walk out of your wedding to one of Atlanta's most powerful men, then kiss another man in a jazz club days later. What do you want people to understand?" Naomi's voice was steady, but her fingers clutched the locket at her neck. "That I walked away from a lie, not from love, and I kissed the man I knew before anyone tried to package me into something pretty and profitable." Jasmine interrupted, soft-spoken and manipulative. "Naomi, we were all just so shocked. I mean, Deshawn adored you. The whole city wanted that union. We were all rooting for you." Naomi turned to her, eyes like steel. "Were you rooting for me when you leaked our kiss to the press?" A pause. Tension snapped across the set, like live wire. The host blinked. "Are you suggesting Miss Bell was the source of the leak?" Naomi smiled, cold, professional. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating that she was the only other person in that club with a phone out, and her camera roll was subpoenaed yesterday." Jasmine's face paled beneath her makeup. "That's ridiculous." Naomi leaned in. "You sent it to Deshawn first. He sent it to a blogger. We traced the metadata. Do you want the timestamps, Jazz?" The anchor leaned forward, suddenly fascinated. Jasmine began to unravel. I was just trying to protect your image, Naomi. You were spiraling, throwing everything away for a man who came from nothing." Naomi's voice rose, sharp now. "Don't you dare speak on where Malik came from. He's worth more than all the silk and silence in this city." The host cleared his throat, glancing toward producers. But Naomi wasn't done. She faced the camera. To everyone watching, I was raised in a world that taught me to smile, kneel, and obey. To be seen but not felt. I followed every rule, every tradition. But love isn't born from control, and survival is not the same as peace. She reached into her purse and pulled out the prenuptial agreement. This is the contract I was pressured to sign. It bound me to silence, to financial dependence, to being nothing more than an ornament in someone else's empire. I choose my own voice. The camera zoomed in slightly. I am not a scandal. I am a woman who said no, and I will not apologize for remembering who I am. Backstage, Jasmine stormed off set. Her carefully constructed persona lay in shambles. A young intern tried to hand her a water bottle. Miss Bell, are you okay? Don't touch me, she snapped. She reached for her phone and dialed Deshawn. He didn't pick up. She called again. Voicemail. Finally, on the third try, he answered. What do you want? He asked, coldly. She turned the whole damn city against me, Jasmine hissed. You said we'd control the narrative. I said we'd control it until it stopped being useful, Deshawn said flatly. You're messy now. You lost. Don't call me again. And just like that, the line went dead. Jasmine stood frozen, hand trembling. She wasn't the heroine, not even the sidekick. She was the discarded pawn. Elsewhere, Malik stood in the hospital staff break room, watching the clip on his phone with stunned silence. The staff around him murmured with interest, jaws dropping at Naomi's speech. Nyla stepped in, carrying a folder. Well, damn, she said. She didn't just step up. She blew the house down. Malik smiled faintly. That's my butterbean. She handed him the folder. Got something for you. Took some back-channel maneuvering. Inside were records, land purchase deeds, old city blueprints, lists of early campaign donors to Graves Sr., and a name they hadn't expected. Pastor Jonah Sinclair, marked as a silent investor in Heritage Redevelopment Group, which acquired Malik's old neighborhood 3 weeks after the fire. Malik's stomach turned. Your girl's daddy was in on it, Nyla said softly. From the start. That evening, Naomi walked into the Sinclair estate. She didn't knock, didn't wait to be announced. Pastor Jonah was seated at the grand piano in the sunroom, playing slow chords, lost in thought. He looked up. You embarrassed the church today. Naomi stood across from him, arms crossed. You sold out my childhood. You helped cover up a fire that nearly killed Malik. You stood by while they erased his name, and you knew. Jonah's hands froze above the keys. I did what I had to do, to protect you, to protect this family's legacy. Naomi's voice cracked. You protected your ego. You chose empire over empathy. He stood. You don't understand what it took to build this, and I don't care, Naomi snapped, because now I'm building something better, and if that means tearing down what you built, brick by brick I will. Jonah stared at her for a long, quiet moment. Then he sat back down and began playing again, software cold, a hymn of surrender. Thunder rolled over Atlanta like a warning, the kind that didn't just hang in the sky, it slithered under skin and told you something was coming. Naomi stood on the second floor of her mother's old home, staring out at the storm. The window pane rattled faintly in its frame, but her hands were steady, eyes sharper than they'd ever been. Behind her, Malik and Nyla had turned the dining room into an impromptu war room. Stacks of old zoning maps, burner phones, USB drives, and 2 laptops humming with digital noise. They were no longer surviving the scandal. They were going after its source. We can't just hand this over to any reporter, Malik said, gesturing toward the evidence Nyla had recovered. Too many hands are dirty. The moment this leaks, we have to be ready. That means control of the story, the timing, the angle. Nyla nodded, dragging another document across the table. Here, this one connects Jonah Sinclair's private ministry fund to Heritage Redevelopment Group, the same LLC that purchased 28 plots of land in your old neighborhood after the fire. Naomi walked in slowly, heels echoing on hardwood. Including your uncle's house, she added, meaning my father didn't just know, he profited. She dropped a thick envelope on the table. And that's not all. That's the church's internal budget for the past decade. Malik frowned. Where did you get that? Naomi's voice was low. Jasmine gave it to me. Nyla blinked. Wait, Jasmine? Naomi nodded. After the live interview, she called me. Said she had nothing left, that Deshawn cut her off. She offered it all in exchange for one thing. What? Malik asked. Not to be destroyed. Meanwhile, Deshawn Graves sat in his downtown penthouse, lights off, the city blinking around him like a nervous heartbeat. His assistant, a tight-lipped woman in a sharp black dress named Monique, stood across the room. She was new, efficient, and terrifying in a quiet way. They're gathering steam, she said. I ran surveillance. The girls got evidence. The nurse sister's good with tech. And the boy, he's smarter than you gave him credit for. Deshawn sipped his scotch. Everyone makes mistakes. Their biggest is thinking I play by rules. Monique hesitated. You want it handled the old way? He looked up at her, eyes cold and distant. Number that's for men who panic. We'll strike like lightning. One flash, one burn. She nodded. Understood. That night, Naomi returned to New Kingdom Cathedral, dressed in simple black, with a raincoat over her shoulders. The sanctuary was dark, except for the dim glow of the altar lights. She wasn't here to pray. She was here to confront the last ghost. In the back pew sat Bishop Thomas Ivory, her godfather and the church's oldest elder. Wrinkled, regal, always wearing the same brown leather Bible, clipped with a gold pen. He looked up as she approached. You came alone? Naomi nodded. I need to know the truth, before I burn it all down. He patted the pew beside him. Then sit, child. I'll tell you what your father never did. She sat, hands folded. Bishop Ivory spoke softly. The fire was no accident. We all knew that. Your father came to us the night it happened, said it was divine consequence, that sometimes the Lord makes way for blessings by removing obstacles. Naomi's breath hitched. He said Malik's family were obstacles? Not in those words, the bishop said, but the implication was clear. He showed us the contracts. Heritage Redevelopment. Graves Sr. was already promising donations to the church. A new youth center, scholarships. We saw numbers, not people. Naomi turned to him. And you stayed silent. The bishop closed his Bible slowly. I stayed obedient. But obedience without righteousness is sin. I carry that sin every day. She stood, voice shaking. Then help me make it right. He didn't look at her, but he reached into his jacket and handed her a folded envelope. Inside, a notarized letter from Graves Sr. to Pastor Jonah, dated 2 days before the fire. Once the Washington property is cleared, funds will transfer. Praise be. Back at home, Malik was packing a go-bag, flash drive, burner phone, hoodie, gloves. Where are you going? Nyla asked from the hallway. To the press, he said. We're done playing chess. It's time for war. Nyla crossed her arms. You sure you want to go public? Once this is out, there's no going back. He zipped the bag. I'm not going back. I'm going through. Before he could leave, the front door swung open. Naomi stepped inside, soaked from rain, eyes blazing. I have the final piece, she said, holding up the bishop's letter. We tie it all together. We bury them. Malik stepped forward, took her face in his hands. You don't have to do this alone. I know, she whispered. That's why I'm not afraid. But while truth was loading onto USB drives and power was shifting hands, something else was quietly disappearing. At a local coffee shop not far from the hospital, Nyla's phone buzzed once, then again. She ignored the first few, but when she finally looked, her blood ran cold. Trey? Hey, where you at? Malik said you'd meet me. Trey, you okay? You said you'd pick up the files. Trey, Nyla, please don't ghost me. She called Trey immediately. No answer. She called again. Voicemail. Trey? She whispered aloud. Naomi looked up from the laptop. Who's Trey? My contact inside the zoning office, Nyla said, grabbing her keys. He had the original fire marshal's signed report. He was supposed to give it to me tonight. Malik frowned. You don't think... I think they got to him, Neela said, already halfway out the door. And if they did, they know about us. Across town, in a warehouse, barely marked on any map, a man lay tied to a chair, blood on his lip, shirt torn. He looked up weakly as Monique stepped into the room, heels clicking. You should have kept your files to yourself, Trey, she said. People die for less. He spat blood. Truth still comes out. Monique smiled. We'll see. She reached for her phone and dialed Deshawn. We have him. What now? Deshawn's voice came cold through the speaker. Send a message. It began with a kiss that wasn't scripted, wasn't part of any grand announcement plan. Naomi had only meant to brush her lips against Malik's cheek before stepping onto the impromptu press stage they'd set up outside the Velvet Horn. But the moment she leaned in, he turned slightly. Their mouths met. The crowd gasped, the camera snapped, and suddenly it was no longer a scandal, it was a love story. By noon, the blogosphere had flipped its narrative. From Naomi Sinclair ruins her legacy to Atlanta's fallen princess finds true love in the arms of a survivor. Videos of Malik rescuing a child outside the hospital the week before the crash resurfaced. Someone dug up a scholarship he funded anonymously. Local TikTok sleuths started piecing together the fire conspiracy and flooding timelines with support. Team Butterbean began trending. Deshawn's legal counsel filed 3 cease and desists within hours, but the tide had turned. Inside Lowe's boutique, Naomi paced as Lowe pinned the last section of a tailored cream jumpsuit on her. You sure this ain't too fast? Aunt Lowe asked, adjusting the hem. Naomi nodded. They're coming after us anyway. If they're going to tear apart my reputation, I'd rather control why. Malik stood across the room in a navy turtleneck and blazer, fiddling with his watch. This whole fake engagement thing still feels messy. Neela snorted from the corner. Everything about this mess is messy, but it's good strategy. If the media thinks you're an engaged couple with a unified message, they can't paint you as confused, dramatic, or worse, disloyal. Lowe stepped back and admired Naomi. You look like your mama today. Eyes full of storm. Naomi's voice was soft. She told me once, love doesn't always feel safe. Sometimes it feels like jumping off a ledge and daring the wind to catch you. Malik smiled. Then we jumped together. The press event began at dusk beneath the velvet awning of Lowe's boutique. Candles flickered in storm jars. Local artists who owed Malik favors had come to set up lights and sound. Even a gospel choir hummed in the background, drawing a crowd of curious neighbors and Instagrammers. Malik stood at the mic first. His voice was low but strong. A decade ago, I was left for dead in a fire meant to silence me. But I survived, not for revenge, for truth, for peace, for the love I lost, and just found again. He reached for Naomi's hand. This woman, this heart, I never stopped seeing her, even when the world made her forget me. Naomi stepped forward next. Her voice shook only once. This engagement may not be traditional, but it is intentional. We are building something stronger than legacy. We are building truth, and we are doing it together." The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, cameras flashing. Somewhere in the back, an intern for a local magazine wept. Later that night, Naomi and Malik sat side by side on the floor of her mother's living room. The engagement ring, an antique opal that once belonged to Lo, sparkled faintly on Naomi's finger. She turned it slowly. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Malik glanced at her. "You mean pretending to be engaged?" She nodded. "It feels dangerous, like we're tempting fate." He reached for her hand. "It may be fake to the world, but it's real to me." Naomi met his eyes. "You mean that?" "I do," she inhaled. "Then let's not fake it anymore." He blinked. "Naomi!" She leaned in, kissing him fully this time. No cameras, no choir, just them. The weight of years lifting with each breath. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "I'm tired of pretending anything around you." He wrapped his arm around her and held her until sleep came. But across the city, the opposite of love was being forged. Inside a dim warehouse, Trey sat slumped against the wall, face bruised, one eye swollen shut. Monique crouched in front of him, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead with manicured fingers. "You know what I hate, Trey?" she murmured. "Wasted potential. You had all the files, all the access. You could have sold it to me and walked away." Trey spat blood. "Naomi's gonna ruin you people." Monique smirked. "You people? Baby, I am the people. You think Deshaun's the threat? He's just the puppet. I pull the strings now." She stood, walked away, dialed her phone. "It's time. Naomi Sinclair and her boyfriend are soft targets. Use the girl." Pause. The sister, Nyla. At 3:06 a.m., Naomi's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered groggily. "Hello?" A voice crackled through the line. "You've got 24 hours to back off. Call off the engagement. Kill the story, or your little nurse friend won't make it to morning rounds." Click. Naomi sat up, eyes wide. Malik stirred. "What is it?" She turned to him, breath catching in her throat. "They have Nyla." The sanctuary at New Kingdom Cathedral had always been a place of performance. Tailored suits in the pulpit, matching hats in the pews, and a choir that sounded like thunder wrapped in velvet. But this Sunday, it was different. The applause was tight. The greetings were strained. There was a tension that clung to the walls like incense. Because the city had changed overnight. Because Naomi Sinclair was no longer Pastor Jonah's daughter. She was a woman with her own story, and she had declared war on silence. In a side room just off the altar, Naomi stood beside Aunt Lo, slipping her earrings into place. She wore cream slacks, a satin blouse, and no makeup but a bold swipe of red lipstick, the same color her mother used to wear before Sunday service. "They're gonna hate this," Naomi murmured. Lo adjusted her collar. "They already hate you, baby, but they also respect you, and in this city, that's more powerful than being liked." The door creaked open. In stepped Reverend Lucinda Morgan, an elder who'd served under Jonah Sinclair since Naomi was a teenager. Her long silver locks were pinned into a tight bun, and her Bible was clutched like a sword. "I tried to stop him," Reverend Lucinda said quietly. "Your father is about to make an announcement from the pulpit. Something drastic. You need to be ready." Naomi frowned. "What kind of announcement?" Lucinda looked pained. "He's calling for a vote of church discipline, against you, for public disgrace and moral misconduct." Lo let out a sharp breath. "He's using the bylaws?" Lucinda nodded. Section 3C. Anyone under church leadership who acts in a manner contrary to biblical order and brings shame upon the body of Christ. Naomi swallowed. "He's trying to excommunicate me? From my own family's church?" Lo's voice cut like a knife. Then it's time we flip that pulpit upside down. In the main sanctuary, the choir finished their opening hymn. Pastor Jonah stepped to the mic, regal in his flowing black and gold robe, Bible in one hand, prepared statement in the other. He looked out across the sea of faces, some devoted, some uncertain, a few whispering into their phones. Today we confront disruption, he began. We live in a world that applauds rebellion, that celebrates disobedience as authenticity. But the church is not a social stage, it is a house of order. He scanned the pews, eyes landing on Deacon Harris, Sister Amy, and even Bishop Ivory, who sat stiffly in the front row. We are not here to judge, Jonah continued, but to correct. As your shepherd, it is my duty to protect the flock from corruption. He opened the church rulebook, and so I present a formal request to initiate proceedings against Naomi Leanne Sinclair in accordance with Section 3C. The rear doors burst open, all heads turned. Naomi walked down the center aisle, slowly, heels clicking, Aunt Lo beside her. Both women were silent, controlled. Naomi reached the base of the altar and climbed the stairs. Pastor Jonah stepped back slightly. You are out of order. Naomi took the mic from his hand and turned to the congregation. Number, I'm right on time. Cameras in the crowd, likely planted by curious churchgoers or opportunistic media interns, began rolling. Naomi's voice filled the room. For years I wore this church like armor, smiled when told, stood when instructed, knelt when ordered. I was not a daughter. I was a brand. A prop. She held up the original letter recovered from Bishop Ivory. But you can't build truth on contracts soaked in lies. My father, our leader, took donations to help the Graves family clear black neighborhoods, including the one where my childhood friend nearly died in a fire covered up by the very men we now call partners. Gasps rippled through the room. Bishop Ivory stood slowly. It's true, he said, and I repent. I was silent when I should have spoken. Pastor Jonah's voice boomed, desperate. This is a hijacking. You will not use my sanctuary to slander me. Naomi turned to him. You once said, God is not afraid of exposure. Then you shouldn't be either. She paused, then raised her voice. Let's vote, right here, right now. Not on me, but on whether this church wants to follow a man who sold out his own blood for bricks and tithes. Silence. Then Deacon Harris stood. Motion to investigate, he said. Sister Amy rose. Seconded. More stood, one by one, until nearly half the sanctuary was on its feet. Pastor Jonah's hand trembled. His empire was cracking, and it was his daughter swinging the hammer. Later that day, in the quiet of Naomi's childhood bedroom, now reclaimed from its museum-like state, Naomi sat on the edge of the bed, tears trailing silently down her cheeks. She had won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like burial, of innocence, of trust, of the myth that her father's love was unconditional. Malik entered quietly and sat beside her. You okay? He asked. She shook her head. I thought maybe a part of him would fight for me. Not the legacy, not the power, just me. Malik took her hand. He doesn't know how to love what he can't control. Naomi looked at him. Then thank God I found someone who does. They sat in silence, the storm outside finally beginning to clear. Meanwhile, in a dusty back corner of Lowe's boutique, Aunt Lo unearthed an old box labeled Calvin, Summer 13. Inside were newspaper clippings, voice memos, and a cassette tape with a single label scratched in faded ink. J. Sinclair, Call with D. Graves Sr. Lo popped the tape into a player and pressed play. Static, then voices. Graves Sr. Once the fire clears that lot, your people get the funds. Just make sure no questions come from your pulpit. Jonah, my congregation trusts me. I'll keep them calm. Let the smoke handle the rest. Lo's eyes widened. She hit stop and dialed Naomi. Baby, I think I just found the nail for your father's coffin. At that very moment, in a black SUV cruising down a back road near the edge of the city, Nyla's eyes fluttered open. She was alive, bound, bruised, gagged, but not broken. She looked around, recognized one of the men driving. Monique's voice came from the front seat. Change of plans, the story's slipping from us. We're going to send a different kind of message. Nyla's breath caught. She had one shot to escape, and she planned to take it. The tape played softly on a loop in Naomi's bedroom, its grainy voices laced with sin and certainty. Graves Sr., once the fire clears that lot, your people get the funds. Just make sure no questions come from your pulpit. Jonah, my congregation trusts me. I'll keep them calm. Let the smoke handle the rest. It was the sound of empire built on ash. Naomi stared at the recorder, eyes hollow. The voices weren't ghosts. They were warnings. They were truths too long denied. Aunt Lo leaned in the doorway, arms folded. We dropped that recording. Your father is done. Graves too, and maybe the church doesn't survive the fallout. Naomi's voice was calm but resolute. Then it was never built on God to begin with. She turned to Malik, seated by the window, brow furrowed in thought. People deserve the truth, she said, even if it shatters everything. He nodded, but she noticed the hesitation in his eyes, the kind of stillness that precedes a storm. They planned the drop carefully. The goal wasn't to leak it recklessly, it was to control the narrative, shape the fallout before Deshawn and Jonah could twist it into something survivable. The plan? Lo would deliver a copy of the tape to the Atlanta Guardian, a respected local paper that still had integrity left in its ink. Malik would meet with a community organizer to coordinate support for families displaced by Graves' redevelopment projects. Naomi would make a public statement from the same pulpit where she once stood for youth choir announcements. They were ready, but they weren't the only ones planning a spectacle. It began with a single post. Jasmine Bell, in full glam, stood against a soft pink backdrop, holding a sonogram photo. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup was strategically tear-streaked. Caption: I stayed silent because I thought he loved me. But with everyone asking questions, I can't hide anymore. Yes, I'm pregnant. And yes, it's his. Within 30 minutes, the post was viral. The comments were brutal. Is it Malik's? Naomi's gonna snap. This just turned into a Tyler Perry movie. Woo, chilly. Girl, you sure? That man been in the ICU longer than he been in you. Naomi's phone exploded with calls, texts, and screenshots. Aunt Lo nearly threw her glass of wine through the wall. That lying heifer! Malik was already grabbing his coat. I'll talk to her. Put an end to it. Naomi stopped him. Number. Let her talk. Let the lie breathe long enough for it to choke on itself. But it'll distract from the tape, he argued. Only if we let it, Naomi said. Besides, I know the truth. And so do you. Still, Naomi couldn't help but wonder. Why now? Why this lie, at this moment? Jasmine didn't expect Deshawn to show up. She was in her condo, curled on the couch, watching the internet spiral when he walked through the door like a storm in a $1,000 trench coat. He tossed his phone on the table. You're pregnant? He asked flatly. She sat up, mascara smudged but controlled. Why? You scared the truth might stain your suit? He stepped closer, voice low. You're not pregnant, Jasmine. Don't insult me. She didn't flinch. You think this was about getting you back? This was about reminding Atlanta who I am. I'm the girl who could have been a first lady. I was loyal. I was silent. And what did that get me? Scraps. Forgotten. Deshawn's eyes narrowed. Then you better pray Naomi doesn't decide to go nuclear, because if she drops that tape, your stunt won't mean a damn thing. She smiled. It already worked. People aren't talking about her father, or the fire, they're talking about me. He tilted his head. So what happens when the lie unravels? What's your next move? Jasmine shrugged. Make myself the victim. Again, Atlanta loves a redemption arc, especially when it's pretty and pregnant. That night, Naomi sat on the back porch with Malik, the cassette recorder still in her lap, untouched since morning. He was quiet, unusually so. You still thinking about the baby post? She asked. No, he said. I'm thinking about my mum. Naomi looked at him surprised. She disappeared a month before the fire. Never a goodbye. No note. Just gone. His voice was distant. What if she knew? What if she tried to warn Calvin, and they silenced her first? Naomi reached for his hand. Then we keep digging, not just for the city. For her. He nodded, then gently cupped her cheek. I need you to know something, he said. I never touched Jasmine, not once, even when I thought you were gone for good. Naomi smiled faintly. I know. You do? She leaned her forehead against his. Because if you had, you wouldn't be looking at me like that right now. Meanwhile, in a quiet warehouse just outside the perimeter, Nyla made her move. Her wrists were sore, her lip was cracked, but she had memorized the shift changes, the steps, the count of each guard. She waited until they got complacent, when they figured the loudmouth nurse had been broken down. And then, when Monique stepped into the room to gloat, Nyla struck, a chair to the knees, a shard of glass to the arm. Blood, screams, flashing lights. By the time Malik's burner phone rang at 2:48 a.m., she was already in a lift back to the city, bloodied, bruised, but smiling like she'd just won the damn Olympics. Malik answered. Nyla? She exhaled. Tell Naomi I'm okay, but we've got a bigger problem. What? Monique, she said. She's not just Deshawn's cleaner. She's the one who started this cover-up. The fire, the threats. She's the monster behind the monster. At dawn, Naomi stood once more before the doors of New Kingdom Cathedral, but this time she didn't enter to repent or plead. She entered to reveal. Reporters filled the pews, community members too. Even Bishop Ivory stood near the altar, ready to introduce her. She stepped up to the pulpit. No robe, no flash, just truth. She played the tape, let it echo off marble walls and stained glass saints. Let Graves' voice bleed into every speaker and smartphone. Let her father's complicity hang in the air like incense gone rotten. When the tape ended, Naomi looked into the crowd. This is not the voice of God. This is the sound of greed, manipulation, murder. We must rebuild, not just brick by brick, but heart by heart. Applause erupted. Some stood in tears, others in fury. But no one remained indifferent. The invitation was elegant, deliberate, and defiantly public. A single matte black card sealed in crimson wax. No florals, no gilded fonts, just one line in silver lettering. You are invited to a union of truth, Naomi and Malik. One night, one vow, one story that will not be buried. Naomi knew what she was doing. She wasn't trying to stage a spectacle. She was rewriting the ending, on her terms, in her voice. The venue wasn't a ballroom or a church. It was the charred ruins of Malik's old childhood lot, now cleared and reimagined into a temporary outdoor space, framed with string lights, paper lanterns, and dozens of folding chairs filled with former neighbors, fire survivors, reporters, and activists. Every flower placed, every candle lit, had meaning. No stage, no altar, no hierarchy, just two people standing where a lie once began. and choosing to end it with truth. Earlier that afternoon, Naomi stood before a mirror in Lo's dressing room. She wore a white pantsuit, no veil, no lace, just clean lines and sharp dignity. Aunt Lo adjusted the collar with trembling fingers. "I didn't think I'd live to see the day," she whispered. "You, standing tall in front of all them snakes, giving them gospel without scripture." Naomi smiled. Mama always said the truth was its own sermon. Lo met her eyes in the mirror. "And you are living proof." Elsewhere, inside a rented SUV circling the neighborhood, Jasmine Bell watched the setup unfold via livestream. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her mascara was perfect. Her phone buzzed beside her with news alerts. She scrolled with detachment. Sonogram photo from Jasmine Bell revealed to be a stock image from Shutterstock. Sources confirm Jasmine Bell not registered at any OB/GYN in the state. Pregnancy stunt collapses. Former maid of honor under investigation for defamation. The comments were worse, ruthless in ways only the internet could be. Jasmine closed the app, picked up her compact, adjusted her lip liner. "I still have one more move," she murmured to herself. Then she pulled out the flash drive Deshawn had given her weeks ago, the one she was never supposed to use. It contained every underhanded deal, bank transfer, and email thread between Graves Enterprises, Jonah Sinclair, and Heritage Redevelopment. A digital confession of rot. "If you're going down," she whispered, "I'm taking all of you with me." Back at the lot, the wedding began without a processional. Naomi and Malik stood hand in hand under the weeping willow planted by volunteers just the week before, in the exact spot where his childhood porch once stood. Malik wore a simple charcoal suit, no tie, sleeves slightly rolled up to show his healing scars. Naomi's eyes met his with steady fire. The officiant wasn't clergy. It was Nyla, bruised lip and all, standing between them with a voice full of bite and honor. "I'm not gonna read you no scripture," she said. "You two already survived more fire than hell could handle. So instead, I'll say this." She looked to Malik. "Do you promise to never run from who you were and never forget who she was before the world told her how to behave?" Malik nodded. "I do." Nyla turned to Naomi. "And do you promise to love this man, not just for surviving, but for choosing to rebuild instead of burn it all down?" Naomi's voice didn't tremble. "I do." They didn't exchange rings. They exchanged keys to each other's homes, to the lives they'd lived apart, symbolic, simple, and beautiful. Then, without any instruction, they kissed, and the crowd erupted in cheers, applause, tears, and camera flashes. The truth had finally walked down the aisle. But 10 blocks away, Monique stood in a shadowed room with a half-dozen digital screens flickering in front of her. One showed the wedding stream, another showed a satellite map of the lot. She was calm, dressed in slate-grey athleisure, earpiece inch, mouth flat. A man beside her, someone new, someone clean-cut and nervous, asked, "Are we really doing this?" Monique sipped her tea. "No bombs, no blood. That's old school." She pointed at the screen. "We're going to kill the legacy, publicly, without pulling a single trigger." The nervous man blinked. "How?" She smirked. "Upload the Sinclair files. Dump them all. From the pulpit payments to the private texts between Jonah and Graves. Full transparency. Let the world do the destroying for us." He hesitated. "Even the ones about the clinic shut down? The church bribes?" She nodded. "Upload. Now." At the wedding's post-ceremony gathering, a block party spilling with soul food, jazz, and black joy, Naomi's phone buzzed relentlessly. Malik noticed first. "You okay?" She pulled the phone out and saw the alert. Breaking. Leaked emails show Pastor Jonah Sinclair accepted hush donations to push through zoning laws, deny permits for black clinics, and silence community whistleblowers. Another ping. CNN, full list of financial records from Graves Enterprises and New Kingdom Cathedral, leaked by anonymous source. Then her father's face appeared on the screen. Not at a pulpit, not in prayer, mugshot. Hours later, in a studio filled with tension and tears, Naomi sat down for a televised interview with Nia Caldwell, a respected journalist known for giving no one a pass. The lights were hot, the questions brutal, but Naomi never flinched. Yes, he's my father, and no, I'm not sorry for exposing him. Because if blood makes you blind to truth, then we are not family, we are hostages. Malik taught me that surviving isn't the same as living, and I plan to live, loudly, freely, authentically. The feed was watched by millions. Across town, in a quiet motel, Jasmine finally powered down her phone. The internet was done with her. Her name was poison. She stared at herself in the mirror. Maybe it's time to disappear, she whispered, but in the drawer below her bed, the drive was still glowing, still full of more fire, and maybe, just maybe, she wasn't done yet. There's a kind of silence that settles just after revolution. Not peace, not calm, but the hush of a city holding its breath. Atlanta was quiet, but its streets hummed beneath the surface. In barbershops and boutiques, at prayer meetings and porch cookouts, people weren't just talking about Naomi and Malik anymore. They were talking about everything. The fire, the money, the betrayals, the false sermons, the truth finally dragging itself into daylight. But in one room, deep in the back of a hospice center on the south side, someone stirred who hadn't spoken in years, and she remembered everything. Aunt Lo was organizing old vinyls in the back of her boutique when the knock came. 3 slow knocks, then silence. She opened the door cautiously, expecting maybe a reporter or another old friend trying to slide back into relevance. But instead, she found a woman, frail, with salt and pepper locks tucked into a scarf, eyes sunken but alert. A nurse stood behind her, unsure. The woman smiled faintly. I didn't think you'd still be here. Lo's knees almost buckled. Alicia? Alicia Washington, Malik's mother, the woman presumed dead. She stepped forward with a grace that defied her trembling frame. I saw the news. I saw my baby. Her voice cracked. I never thought I'd live long enough to say those words. Lo reached out, hugging her, trembling. We thought you were gone, girl. You disappeared. Alicia pulled back, eyes full of unshed tears. I didn't disappear. I was disappeared. Meanwhile, in the loft, Naomi now shared with Malik, a knock at the door pulled her from a stack of open letters. Threats, support, job offers, book deals. The whole country wanted a piece of her. She opened the door to find Nyla, eyes wide, clutching a folder. Her lip was still healing, but her expression was sharper than ever. I found something, she said, pushing past. About the fire. And about me. Malik followed behind moments later, groceries in hand, pausing when he saw the look on his sister's face. Nyla dropped the folder on the table. Inside, adoption papers, birth certificates, and a small manila envelope labeled Confidential. Placement Order, 2009. Naomi read it aloud. Nyla Washington, to be placed with guardians, per emergency removal protocol, birth mother, Alicia Washington. Malik blinked. Wait, that's my mum. Neela looked at him, face pale. I'm not your adoptive sister, Malik. I'm your blood. I'm your sister. The room went still. Malik sank into a chair, eyes locked on Nyla. You're sure? He asked. She nodded, voice barely above a whisper. It was buried in an old file at the Department of Health. No one touched it for years. I was listed under a different name for a few months, then reassigned. I guess, after Mum vanished, the system just moved me. Malik swallowed hard. All this time, we thought we were strangers who found each other by luck. Neela smiled faintly. We were family, trying to remember who we were. Naomi pressed her hand over her heart, overwhelmed by the moment. This changes everything. Malik shook his head. Number. It just proves everything. That fire tried to kill our story, but we're still here. Back at the boutique, Aunt Lo sat across from Alicia, in stunned silence. You were taken? Lo asked gently. By who? Alicia sipped from her tea, hands trembling. A week before the fire, Calvin found documents. Proof Graves Sr. was bribing inspectors to start clearing our neighborhood illegally. He planned to go public. I told him to wait, that it was dangerous. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. And then, 2 men showed up at my work, told me if I didn't disappear, something would happen to Malik. They called it a precautionary removal. They said Calvin was being watched. She gripped her cup tighter. They said they'd place my kids somewhere safe, said I'd be reunited, but I woke up in a clinic 3 states away, heavily sedated. I've been in and out of hospitals ever since. Lo whispered, You were institutionalized. Alicia nodded, and I let them do it, because I thought Malik was dead. Until now. Lo stood. You need to tell him. Tonight. The moment Alicia stepped into Naomi and Malik's loft, silence fell. Malik froze. He stared at the woman. Older, thinner, but with the same eyes he remembered at age 10. His breath caught. Alicia, he whispered. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm sorry, baby. I never meant to leave you. He walked forward slowly, like if he blinked, she'd vanish. Then he wrapped her in a hug that trembled from the inside out. I thought you were gone, he murmured. She pulled back, cupping his face. And I thought you were buried. From the side, Nyla wiped a tear. Naomi reached for Malik's hand. And in that moment, the fire didn't matter. The past didn't matter. They had survived. But the peace didn't last long. As the sun dipped below the horizon, emergency alerts flashed across every phone in the room. Breaking. Early morning blaze consumes a former Graves-owned storage unit. Fire department confirms evidence of arson. Possible link to Sinclair expose. Naomi's heart dropped. No, not the files. Malik opened his phone and tapped furiously. Those were backup locations. Trey's files, archives. We saved some copies, but if they're targeting the rest... Nyla paled. They're burning evidence, again. Naomi stood. We're not going to let them do this again. Not in the dark, not in silence. She walked to the window, the city lights blinking beneath her like stars just barely surviving. Tomorrow, she said, we go national. TV, live streams, every platform. We tell everything. Malik joined her. Even the parts that hurt. Naomi nodded, especially the parts that hurt. Elsewhere, in an abandoned printing press turned operations center, Monique stood with her arms crossed as the fire streamed across the television. Behind her, a new figure entered, tall, suited, with his face hidden in shadow. We're running out of time, she said flatly. The man removed his glasses. His voice was gravel and arrogance. Then we start targeting hearts, not headlines. It wasn't a church. It wasn't a courtroom. It wasn't a press conference behind velvet curtains. The stage where Naomi Sinclair chose to end the first season of Her Truth was an outdoor altar, set in the heart of Sweet Auburn, where her father used to preach about power, but her mother used to whisper about justice. The old historic district had been battered by greed, buried beneath zoning red tape and bulldozers, but today it breathed again. Naomi and Malik didn't just want cameras. They wanted witnesses. They wanted testimony. They wanted the people. They set up long before sunrise. Aunt Lo brought in a mobile salon truck for the local women, offering free styling as thank you for their community help. The Jackson twins from the West End set up the sound system. Neela worked logistics. Alicia sat beside the stage with a blanket over her legs and a warm tea in hand, glowing like an ancestor who'd seen too much and survived it all. Malik stood in front of the unfinished podium, just 2 wooden crates stacked under a canopy. "You sure about this?" he asked. Naomi tightened the mic clip to her collar. "I was born for this." "Not raised for it?" She smiled faintly. "Exactly." The crowd began to grow before noon. Church elders, hospital workers, teachers, street poets, former members of New Kingdom Cathedral, some in tears, some just watching with wary eyes. The media showed up like bees to honey. Local, national, and even global. They were here not for scandal anymore, but for what came next. Naomi stepped up just after the choir from the Oakland Avenue Recovery Center sang a soul-splitting version of I Shall Not Be Moved. She didn't carry notes, no teleprompter, just memory, pain, fire. "My name is Naomi Sinclair, daughter of Jonah Sinclair, and for too long that name meant silence." She let the pause breathe, let the weight fall into the soil. "I grew up believing that faith was control, that obedience was love, that legacy meant wearing pain like pearls and pretending it was divine. But I was wrong. Legacy is not obedience. Legacy is truth, and truth, especially in Black America, is holy." The crowd stirred, murmurs of amen. She continued, voice rising. "My father, my own blood, took bribes to keep quiet while communities burned, while clinics closed, while lies were buried beneath pulpits and parking lots. And when I found out, I wasn't brave. I almost married a man who wanted to silence me too. But fate and fire brought me back to the boy I loved, the boy I lost, the boy who now stands beside me, not in shadows, but in light." She turned to Malik, hand reaching. "We are not a scandal. We are survivors. And today, this isn't just a reckoning, it's a reclamation." A cheer erupted, but it was interrupted. From the back of the crowd came raised voices, a disruption, a scuffle near the press line. Naomi squinted, then froze. Deshaun Carter, dressed in a tailored cream suit, flanked by 2 security guards, and wearing a smug calm that belied the firestorm around him. He stepped forward, waving a stack of documents. "Monsieur Sinclair," he said into his own lapel mic, live-streaming to his followers, "you forgot to tell the people one thing." The cameras pivoted. He raised the papers. "That your late mother took a private loan from Graves Enterprises in 2007, without church knowledge, which makes her complicit too." Gasps. A ripple of doubt. Naomi's fingers trembled. "You forged that." Deshaun smiled. "Did I? Or did I just do what you've been doing, using memory for narrative?" Aunt Lo stood. "You better sit your slick behind down before this community rises up." But Malik had already moved. He stepped forward, slow, controlled. His voice was razor steel. "You want to tarnish a dead woman's name to save your contracts?" he asked. "You trying to discredit her, to rescue the lies she fought against?" Deshaun chuckled, but his eyes twitched. "I'm just saying," he smirked, "that there's more than one side to every—" Malik punched him, hard. The crowd gasped. Cameras spun. Deshaun stumbled, nose bloodied, but he didn't fall. He straightened slowly, rage bubbling beneath his skin. "You just made your own scandal, lover boy," he hissed. Naomi stepped between them. "You made ours first," she whispered. Security de-escalated the scene, escorting Deshaun out as chants of "Truth, truth" rose from the crowd like gospel thunder. Naomi turned back to the mic. I will not let lies rewrite the legacy of a woman who birthed freedom into me, she said. My mother's only crime was loving a church that stopped loving its people. The crowd clapped, harder now. We cannot heal if we keep pretending our wounds are scripture. We cannot lead if we keep building altars to men instead of God. She raised her hand. Malik joined her. Nyla, too. Alicia stood shakily from her chair. This isn't just the end of a scandal. This is the birth of something holy, and this time, no one will burn it down. After the crowd dispersed, Naomi sat under the weeping willow, alone for a moment. She needed to breathe, to feel it, the after, the peace. Malik sat beside her, silent. Then Nyla joined them, and Alicia. One by one, survivors sat beneath the tree. Jasmine watched from afar. No cameras, no speeches, just silence. She didn't approach, but she did slide the last of Deshawn's incriminating files into Naomi's email inbox that night. Anonymous sender. Subject line. Greater than for the next fight. Love never dies. New Kingdom Cathedral's building was condemned. Alicia and Aunt Lo launched a foundation in Malik's father's name. Naomi signed a book deal titled Ashes Don't Lie. Jasmine disappeared from the public eye until her anonymous blog about surviving religious control went viral. And Deshawn? He was under federal investigation. But on one quiet morning, Naomi and Malik returned to the willow tree, not to speak, not to perform, but to plant something new. They dug into the earth. They buried the last copy of the fire tape, not to hide it, to fertilize it, because truth doesn't die when planted in good soil. Here comes the end of the season. If you're interested in Season 2, comment Mr. Hope Season 2.